Hello, it's Toaster Party, and today I'm going to talk about what my picks are for the 5 strongest new cards for CEDH in 2023. So this past year had a lot of really powerful cards for CEDH, more so than most years. So without further ado, let's get into the list. Starting off with an honorable mention of Hoarding Broodlord. Hoarding Broodlord for 5 generic and 3 black, you get a creature dragon with Convoke that has flying that says, whenever Hoarding Broodlord enters battlefield, search the library for a card, exile it face down, then shuffle. For as long as that card remains exiled, you may play it. Spells you cast from exile have Convoke. It is also a 7/6. So, why this card is an honorable mention is because of a combo that it enables with Saw in Half, where you cast or reanimate the Hoarding Broodlord. Hoarding Broodlord then searches up Saw in Half. You then cast the Saw in Half, targeting the Hoarding Broodlord, using the Convoke, of course, to save you a little bit of mana. And then you search up Sacrifice or Burnt Offering and peer into the Abyss, which, hitting one of the Hoarding Broodlord tokens, will allow you to make 8 mana, which will be enough to cast said peer into the Abyss. So it's basically an easy way to get into peer into the Abyss, especially for decks that want to be able to reanimate this, or just make a lot of creatures that it can hard cast with Convoke. Very powerful win condition. Moving on now to number 5, Born Upon a Wind. For generic and a blue, you get an instant that says you may cast spells this turn as though they had flash. It also says draw a card. So, being able to cast things at instant speed is a very powerful effect. We saw this already a little bit with Emergent Zone, but this is just a much better card than that. This is especially a good effect when you're trying to win the game off of it. Say your opponent's trying to combo off, but you can then Born Upon a Wind in response to whatever their win attempt is, and then try to do a win attempt on top of theirs. So it's a very powerful card that it's especially good in decks that really have to rely on more sorcery speed win conditions, because it can get around that. Moving now to number 4, Beseech the Mirror. For 1 generic and 3 black, you get a sorcery that has Bargain, that being you may sacrifice an artifact, enchantment, or token as you cast this spell. And it says search your library for a card, exile it face down, then shuffle. If this spell was Bargained, you may cast that card without paying its mana cost, and if that spell's mana value is 4 or less, put the exiled card into your hand if it was not cast this way. So basically it's a tutor that can skip past having to pay for what it's tutored. So this allows players to get into a lot of really powerful cards for pretty much just 4 mana. Things like the One Ring, Rhystic Study, Shieldred the Apocalypse, the list can go on. And also, of course, Underworld Breach. So it's a really powerful card for those low-color black decks that can just put the win condition or value piece onto the battlefield with just maybe a slightly higher cost, but sometimes it's just the same mana cost is what's being tutored for, and all you have to do is sacrifice an artifact, enchantment, or token, which is not difficult for a lot of decks to be able to do. Moving now to number 3, Dauntless Dismantler. For 1 generic and a white, we get a human artificer that says artifacts your opponent's control enter the battlefield tapped. You can also play X, and white to sacrifice Dauntless Dismantler to destroy each artifact with mana value of X. It is also a 1/4. So this is the best stacks piece that the format has gotten in a while, as it is something that can slow down a lot of combo decks that are trying to spit out artifacts and try to win with something like Dockside Extortionist, because now they have to wait to be able to do that. Also, having that artifact destruction effect can be very useful, especially if your opponent's trying to do something that requires a specific mana cost of artifact on the field. And another upside is that 4 toughness is a really good place to be, as it gets around quite a few different removal spells that are damage based. Moving now to number 2, Orcish Bowmasters. For 1 generic and a black, you get a Orc Archer with Flash that says whenever Orcish Bowmasters enters the battlefield, and whenever an opponent draws a card except the first one that they draw in each of their draw steps, Orcish Bowmasters deals 1 damage to any target, then a Mass Orcs 1. It's also a 1/1. So basically this punishes card advantage engines by hurting both life totals and is able to shoot down boards if the creatures are small enough, or if your opponent draws enough cards. It also punishes people for playing any form of draw effect, making cards like Peer into the Abyss, Raffine, and Villas, and tons of other cards that have draw on it a whole lot worse, because If a lot of draw is occurring, then either life totals are going to shrink down immensely, or the board's just going to get wiped by a single 2-drop. Also, that army token provides an additional threat to life totals beyond just the ability to punish players for one of the most common effects in CEDH. Moving now to number 1, though, we have the One Ring. For 4 generic, you get a legendary artifact with Indestructible that says, when the One Ring enters the battlefield, if you cast it, you gain protection from everything until your next turn. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life for each bird encounter on the One Ring. You can tap it to put a bird encounter on the One Ring, then draw a card for each bird encounter on the One Ring. I've heard this card described as mid-range's very own ad nauseum, because it draws a lot of cards. Another thing is that it pretty much has gone into every single deck available. Because right now the format is in a much slower state, so you can easily rely on this being able to draw a lot of cards, and after that initial 4 mana investment, you don't have to worry about drawing cards or having to pay for it for the rest of the game. Another thing is that that protection effect also can come up sometimes. But overall, just one of the most powerful draw engines that the format has received in a very long time. Well, that's all I had to say. Thank you all for watching. Hope you leave a like, comment, subscribe, and I hope you all have an excellent day.